Northwest Liberty News, picking the lock on the shackles of tyranny.
Machines are going to fail, and the system's going to fail.
The past is past, the future's now.
Don't look at me. I think these people are completely nuts.
Sometimes trouble just follows a man.
There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus.
Can't you stop your lips from flapping for 2 little minutes?
It's because I'm white.
I'm a man. I'm sensitive. I need to feel loved. I need to be desired.
I'm rapping to becoming a big underground success in this town.
That's a question of methods. Everybody wants results, but nobody wants to do what they have to do to get them done.
And now, coming to you live from Kalispell, Montana, brought to you by Northwest Liberty News, it's Montana Gazette Radio with your host, James White. Okay, I'm your host, James White. This is Montana Gazette Radio. Thanks so much for joining us here on this 8th day of January 2021. And the last year is behind us, and this year is certainly starting out to be quite a doozy, to say the least. We appreciate you joining us here on Freedom Friday. We have a couple of great guests today here. I've got Gene Pringle, who's a returning guest on with us first. He's a tax expert, and we're going to have Amy Proctor on with us at 10:30. She's going to be on. She was down there in D.C. and right by the action, I guess you'd want to say, that happened down there at the Capitol. She was there. She's a photojournalist, and she was there and was right in the vicinity of some of the people that died, a couple of the people that died there, I believe. And she's going to be here to talk about that after our first guest is off the air with us. But we're going to welcome Gene Pringle here on the show, tax expert. He's been here as a walk-in encyclopedia when it comes to tax stuff, and he's been on the show here numerous times, and always great to have him on here. He's a wealth of knowledge and information, and we're going to talk today about getting remedy from the taxes. So let me hit the button here and go ahead, Gene. If you can go ahead and hit the unmute. There we go. Gene Pringle, thanks so much for joining us here on Montana Daily Gazette Radio.
Hey, good morning, Jim, and Happy New Year to everyone. It's getting off to a kind of a ruckus start, but, that's the way things go in this country. That's why we're free.
Right,
we do things ruckus once in a while, and we probably need to do some more.
Well,
but anyway.
I tell you one thing, Gene, we're free. We're free. Let me comment real quick. We're free, but it doesn't appear that we have free elections, which is troubling. It's troubling. And this is election thing was just quite a fiasco, and I got a feeling that we're not totally done with it all yet.
Yeah, I agree, Jim, and we could be talking about that for the next 2 weeks. But indeed. I think there's going to be some things coming out in the very near future that will shed some light on what went on in Washington. But anyway, let's get to the issue at hand, and that is the tax issue. So I've heard so many people complain, and they do things. They follow somebody's stuff, and they do something. And they file a return. And the IRS says that's frivolous, and you're getting penalized $5,000. And here's the taxes and all the interest and penalties that we want. And what do we do next? Well, you have a choice. You can fight it or you can pay it. But if you're going to fight it, how are you going to do it? And this has been something that I've been digging into for years, and I think we're finally getting close to a solution. So I'm going to discuss some things and shed some light on some things that we need to understand about tax law before we're going to ever get a remedy. And we also need to understand that we, the people, are endowed by the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I'm going to read you a paragraph, and this is cited in so many Supreme Court cases that it's pathetic. And it goes like this. While this court has not attempted to define with exactness the liberty thus guaranteed, The term has received much consideration, and some of the included things have been definitely stated. Without doubt, it denotes not merely the freedom from bodily restraint, but also the right of the individual to contract, to engage in any of the common occupations of life, to acquire useful knowledge, to marry, establish a home, and bring up children, to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience, and generally to enjoy those privileges long recognized at common law as essential to the orderly pursuit of happiness by free men. I'm not going to cite all the cases that support that statement, but they are numerous, and they start out with the slaughterhouse cases, 16 Wall 36, and go through the Wright versus Cambridge Board of Health, 200 Massachusetts 174. Needless to say, we have a right, a fundamental God-given right to exist and sell our most sacred property called labor in order to do so. So what's our remedy against these people who have taken it upon themselves, maybe from bad advice to their supervisor or whatever, but they're going to punish you for exercising a right? This is basically what they're doing here, is they're punishing you for exercising your right to earn a living by taxing you as though you were engaged in some privileged activity when you are not. It's the difference between knowing what wages are paid for and what wages are exempt. So there are wages that are subject to taxation, and there are wages that are exempt from taxation by fundamental law. The wages that are exempt is the wages that are paid you for rendering personal services, which is what you do when you go to work at the grocery store or the shop, some machine shop, or whatever it is, whatever job, whatever profession you can claim that's not a privileged office or a profession, like being a politician or an attorney or a manufacturer of alcohol or distilled spirits or tobacco or firearms. So if you don't work in those industries, and even if you did work in those industries, you're not the one that's licensed to manufacture the firearm. If you are, you're going to pay the federal firearms tax. It's passed on to the buyer just like you do it with alcohol or tobacco. It's passed on to the consumer. But the original person who pays it is the manufacturer or the distiller. The person who works at the factory is not engaged in a privileged occupation. He is engaged in an occupation of common right. He's not an elected or appointed official. He does not take an oath of office. He has no duty to pay any tax on his earnings. This goes the same for anyone in the private, so-called private sector of America. We have no duty to pay any tax on our earnings. I hope you can understand the simplicity of that statement. So the thing is, we have to understand that we have rights, but now we need to understand how we can exercise those rights. So let's talk about a 1040 tax return and what it is. When you file a federal tax return, you are testifying about the information that you enter on that form. That is a testimony of a witness according to the Supreme Court. So when you file that tax return and you put a 0 on there for wages or income, and you put a 0 there instead of the amount you were paid as wages for your earnings. In other words, you were paid so-called wages for your employment. But are you really engaged in taxable employment? In order to understand that, you've got to get into the code and the regulations. The first definition of wages is found in 26 U.S.C. 3121. And that tells you what wages are. But wages are paid for employment. Employment is defined in 26 U.S.C. 3121B. And employment takes place aboard an American vessel or aircraft or within the United States. And this key term we have to understand. The United States is not the 50 states of the American Union. The United States is the District of Columbia and the territories. It falls under Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, and Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 and 18. The district is under exclusive jurisdiction of Congress. If you look at the definition of state in the United States and the Internal Revenue Code, you'll find out that it says state means the District of Columbia. They'd like to be a state, but under our Constitution, the District of Columbia cannot be a state. It's a seat of government. It does not have representation in the Senate because it does not deserve representation in the Senate.
Let me pause for a second, Gene. Let me pause there for a second.
Territory that belongs to
Let me pause you for a second.
Territory that belongs to Congress.
The first 100 days they're proposing now, someone has already come out with a proposal that if Biden gets installed illegally there, the first 100 days they're going to try to make Washington, D.C. a state. That's their goal within the first 100 days.
It would violate the Constitution.
That doesn't bother them.
It would violate the purpose for creating the District of Columbia in the first place. It's 10 square miles that shall be recognized as a seat of government for the United States of America. That's all it can be. It cannot be a state, because that would tip the Senate always in favor of the Democrats.
That's why they want to do it.
Well, let's get back to the tax issue. Let's not get off the farm here. Let's leave that issue for other people. So what we want to do is get a remedy. So let's talk about this, and the fact that once we understand what we're doing is we're testifying about a situation. We're testifying about our own personal situation and our earnings. Earnings are defined in 28 U.S.C. 3002, number 6. That's the Federal Debt Collection Procedures Act. Notice I said federal and not Fair Debt Collection Procedures Act. Two different horses. The Fair Debt Collection Procedures Act is in Title 15. The Federal Debt Collection Procedures Act is in Title 28, which is a judiciary code. Why did they put it there? Because it's instructions for judges and the courts. So let's look at the term earnings and understand that earnings may be denominated as wages, salary, commission, bonuses, or otherwise. So how much can you run through the word otherwise? So now we know that our earnings, which we have a fundamental right to acquire because that's our labor, our most sacred property. When we sell that, that's property. The tax is an income tax. It's a profits tax. It's not a tax on property. And your labor is your most sacred property. So when you put 0 down on that return, that's your testimony. Who has authority to change that? Absolutely nobody. That is your sworn testimony, and there's actually stiff penalties for anyone who attempts to change that or cause you to change it. It's called witness intimidation or tampering with evidence. You'll find that in the penalty statutes of your state. Look it up. In Michigan, it's 750.122, prohibited acts, witness, threats or intimidation, affirmative defenses, violation of felony, penalties, applicability of section and definitions. So section 122, 751.22.1, a person shall not give, offer, or give or promise anything of value to an individual for any of the following purposes: to discourage any individual from attending a present or future official proceeding as a witness, testifying at a present or future official proceeding. Filing a 1040 form or a state form is an official proceeding, or giving information at a present or future official proceeding. To influence any individual's testimony at a present or future official proceeding. they try to change your tax return? Isn't that trying to influence your testimony? To encourage an individual to avoid legal process or withhold testimony or to testify falsely in a present or official proceeding. The government turns around and says, oh, we're going to change your return. Based on what authority? That's your testimony. If they want to counter that testimony, they can file a suit against you for attempting to defraud the government of its tax revenue. And then you can bring in all your information and say, wait a minute, Ralph, I was just earning a living. I have a right to do that. Let's look at the penalties for doing this. A person who violates this section is guilty of a crime as follows, except as provided in subdivisions B and C. The person is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment of not more than 5 years or a fine of not more than $5,000 or both. If the violation is committed in a criminal case for which the maximum term of imprisonment for the violation is more than 10 years, or the violation is punishable by imprisonment for life or any term of years, the person is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment of not more than 10 years and a fine of not more than $20,000. If the violation involves committing or attempting to commit a crime or a threat to kill or injure any person or to cause property damage, the person is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 15 years and a fine of not more than $25,000 or both. Aren't they attempting to damage the property that you have in your labor? Isn't that property damage?
Yes.
Excuse me, we can be finite on the law if we want to, but this law is very broad about your testimony. But here we have a government agency or a state agency that is changing testimony or trying to coerce you to change your testimony. Look at coercion and extortion under state law. Those are both felonies. So this is what the government is doing to you, and to coerce you, browbeat you into changing your testimony, saying, okay, I agree with you, I'll pay, I'll go ahead and pay. You know, just go along to get along is what got us where we're at today. That's why we're in such a deep hole here. Now we got to dig ourselves out. So what is our remedy? Okay. So here we have a situation. Look at your state constitution. Every one of them contains a bill of attainder clause. We also know now that we have laws against messing with your testimony. So now let's look at the bill of attainder. A bill of attainder is a legislative act that combines legislative, executive, and judicial functions in the same individual or agency. Now let's talk about the tax assessor collector, the person who comes at you from the State Department of Revenue. They point their finger at you. They say, oh, you had income and you owe this much tax to the state. Based on what? Because your alleged private sector employer filled out a W-2 and sent it in to the IRS claiming that you were paid wages? Don't we have a right to earn wages? It's called earnings. Are you being compensated for your personal services that you actually perform? That's a fundamental common right that we have. So this juncture of the legislative, executive, and judicial power in the hands, whether a few or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. United States versus Brown, 381 U.S. 437 in 1965. So a bill of pains and penalties is what the common law term for anything that was less than a death penalty. So they call them a bill of pains and penalties. But under our law in the United States of America, a bill of pains and penalties falls under the bill of attainder clause. So when they come in, you and your agency have taken action against me without a judicial trial, without production of a plain statement of the basis of law and factual situation that created the liability, and a total absence of any meaningful administrative hearing. I've had numerous people request administrative hearings, and the IRS just simply ignores it. They don't want to give it because they're afraid the guy might know what he's talking about, or have somebody that's helping him that knows what they're talking about. They don't want to have a hearing because it would make bad precedent. This is the con game that the IRS uses most frequently. So in these cases, what they do is they seize property without a court order or any sort of due process by simply making a claim without merit, ignore the protestation of the individual with what seems to be complete immunity. To me, that is the essence of a bill of attainder, as the courts have ruled. So here's a quote on bill of attainder, right out from the Supreme Court. It is in this spirit that the bill of attainder clause was consistently interpreted by this court until the decision in American Communications Association versus Dodds, 339 U.S. 382, which we shall consider hereinafter. In 1810, Chief Justice Marshall, speaking for the court in Fletcher versus Peck, 6 Cranch 87, which is 10 U.S. 138, stated that a bill of attainder may affect the life of an individual or may confiscate his property or may do both. This means, of course, that what were known at common law as bills of pains and penalties are outlawed by the bill of attainder clause. The court's pronouncement, therefore, served notice that the bill of attainder clause was not to be given a narrow historical reading, which would exclude bills of pains and penalties, but was instead to be read in light of the evil the framers have sought to bar, legislative punishment or any form or severity of specifically designated persons or groups. See also Ogden versus Saunders, 12 Wheat 231, which is 25 U.S. 286. So now we have a glimmer of hope here, because we use the statutes regarding your testimony and the bill of attainder clause because they're taking your property without a judicial trial. When did you ever see a judicial trial in a tax matter? If you file a suit against them for a tax matter, say, oh, we can't do that. That's the Anti-Tax Injunction Act. Okay? They'll try to shut you down in filing a suit against the tax assessment. But I believe that the assessment can be challenged under the bill of attainder clause because you have not received the information requested from the IRS. Show me the statute that makes me liable. Show me its regulation in 26 CFR Part 1, which enforces that statute as required by 7805. 26 U.S.C. 7805 is the Secretary of Treasury's authority to promulgate regulations to enforce the statute. The Supreme Court in California Bankers Association versus Schultz said that the Internal Revenue Code, standing by itself, imposes no duty on anyone to do anything until it has a regulation enforcing it.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat
so
that?
Can you repeat that? Authority.
Can you repeat that one more time? Because that's very important what you just stated. That sentence you just read right there is very important.
Yes,
can you
it's
please
California Bankers Association versus Schultz. If you put that in your search engine, it'll come up. But anyway, what they said there was that the 26 U.S.C., in other words, the Internal Revenue Code imposes no duty on anyone to do anything until that section is supported by a regulation promulgated by the Secretary of Treasury. If the Secretary were to do nothing, the code imposes no duty on anyone. Now let's go to assessment authority. You're going to find assessment authority under what, 6201? I think it's the right statute. Just mouthing off the top of my head. I think it's 6201 is assessment authority. 6203 is method of assessment. See if I'm right.
You're usually right, Gene.
5201, assessment authority.
You're usually right, Gene.
Anybody want to venture a guess at where the regulation for that is at? The enforcing regulation for assessment authority is found in 27 CFR Part 70. That's BATF's regulations. What does that have to do with internal revenue? Nothing. So when the IRS says they've assessed you a tax, that's a fraud. It's also an extortion because they don't have assessment authority under Part 1. There's never been a substantive regulation promulgated for assessment authority or method of assessment since the beginning of the Internal Revenue Code.
Well, Gene, hold on a second. I'm going to take a break here in a minute. But here's the common response that I get, and you can address this before we go to break. People say, "Oh, that all sounds real good, Jim, but just go ahead and try not paying your taxes and see what happens to you." That's the response that we get coming back, and they've created such a element of fear and such a chilling effect. You know, they arrest high profile people and make
because absolutely, Jim. That's exactly what they do, because the people that don't know what they're doing, because they listen to somebody that doesn't follow through with stuff, they don't know the right steps to do. If you've been filing tax returns and you suddenly stop without doing the right thing, you're going to get nailed. They'll come at you. But when they do come at you, you've got to understand how to get that remedy. It's what I'm trying to inform you of here today.
All right, very good.
You're testifying on that form. That's your testimony. Nobody can change that without your consent. What they do is they browbeat you into change, or threaten you, and you change your testimony in a manner to go along and get along, or they want to come out and put an assessment against you, and then they levy you and they seize your property and sell it because they claim you owed a tax.
Well,
where's the proof?
Let's take a quick
break.
Did
they ever furnish you with a statute? Did you ever ask for the statute? You got to know what to ask for.
Well, we'll cover that back when we get back on the other side of the break. Before we go to break, Gene, let everybody know where they can find out more about you. I believe it's uncommonconsultant.org. Is that correct?
Uncommonconsultant.org.
Uncommonconsultant.org is my man Gene Pringle's website there. You can go on there and let us know real quick, Gene, when they visit uncommonconsultant.org, what kind of things can they find there? I know they can buy blocks of time for you to help people with their taxes.
So there's lots of information there. We're trying to get more up there on it. I have another website called uncommonconsultantllc.com that you can go on to and research information. There's a ton of information on that website. There will be more information coming up on the .org website very soon. We're setting up documents that we'll have that people can actually download. They can purchase the documents and download them. They'll have to enter information. That's what we're working on now, is getting the right information to be entered, because a lot of these things are state specific. If you're dealing with a state income tax, federal income tax is different. It's uniform all over the country. So we can have a canned document for a federal issue, but state issues, it's different, because you have every state in the union has a little bit different wording.
Sure.
But practically every state in the union states the same thing in their statutes, that they use the Internal Revenue Code as a guide for their state income tax.
You're right. You're right about that.
And that's really all we need to know.
All right. Uncommonconsultant.org. Gene Pringle, we're going to put you on hold here. We're going to go on a quick break here. We come back on the other side. We'll pick back up with Gene Pringle. This information's gold, folks. I mean, they rob you and pillage you, and it's just taxation is theft. And we're trying to provide remedies for you here on the broadcast. You can support us by going to MontanaGazetteRadio.com, MontanaGazetteRadio.com, or MontanaDailyGazette.com. Of course, the flagship of Northwest Liberty News. Please go ahead and hit the like button if you don't mind, and appreciate that, and help share the broadcast around. We're going to, again, take a quick break. We'll be back on the other side here with tax expert Gene Pringle. I'm your host, James White, from Montana Gazette Radio. If you like classic cars, exceptional service, and a money-back guarantee, then the Corner Shop in beautiful downtown Kalispell is the place for you. Whether it's an oil change, engine diagnostic, suspension work, or brakes all around, the Corner Shop has you covered. With expert technicians and a free consultation on all services, you can't go wrong with the Corner Shop. Did I mention the classic cars? While you're waiting for your expert service to be performed, take a stroll through the showroom to see Kalispell's smoothest collection of classic cars. The Corner Shop is conveniently located at 1212 South Main, just south of the courthouse. The Corner Shop is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m., so drop by for an appointment or call 755-7777. That's 755-7777. The Corner Shop, Kalispell's full-service auto repair facility. Hi, this video is brought to you by PatriotPrepared.com, where right now you can save $250 on each large package purchase, plus get free shipping to the continental United States. In these troubled times, it's not a bad idea to have some extra food storage available, and you can save big at Patriot Prepared right now. Go to PatriotPrepared.com, that's PatriotPrepared.com, and use the code TRUMP250 at checkout to receive your savings today. Okay, folks, if you want to support this broadcast, you can do so by supporting our sponsors there. If you're in Kalispell and you're looking for an auto repair shop, go right down to the Corner Shop there and talk to Dan and all the great folks down there. They'll be happy to help you out. Full-service auto repair facility. Get about anything you need done there at Dan's shop. And I've known Dan for quite a few years. He's a good guy, and I certainly do appreciate the sponsorship here on the show. Or you can go to PatriotPrepared.com, and you can save on large food packages now if you haven't prepared yet. Now is a good time as any, because you never know what's going to happen. And if you want to support us otherwise, you can just go to northwestlibertynews.com. That's northwestlibertynews.com. Click on the Support Independent News. We're funded by you, the listener, and we do appreciate your support. Okay, we're going to bring Gene Pringle back on the line, tax expert. Gene has been on the show numerous times. He's always dishing out some great truth here. And, again, as we've had Gene on the show before, and he's talked about the only places that you are, I think, the only place that you really are qualified to have earnings, I believe, is on an aircraft carrier. And I forget with you, Gene, give us that one again. Is it a boat, an aircraft carrier? No.
Go ahead. No. The statute is 26 USC 3121B. This is under Social Security laws. B defines employment, and it's within the United States or on or in connection with an American vessel or aircraft when it touches at a port in the United States.
Okay, a vessel or aircraft, not an aircraft carrier.
An American vessel or American aircraft would be a vessel or aircraft that's chartered under the laws of the United States. That would be the District of Columbia. But most private carriers like American Airways, Alaska Airlines, Delta, those planes are owned by those corporations, and they're probably chartered under state law.
Wow,
so
what a fraud. What a fraud.
The state law would apply. But if the state is taxing the same thing as the federal, how would your earnings for working as a stewardess or as a pilot or anything else be considered taxable wages? Except for the fact that the government is engaged in a fraud and extortion racket with the tax code.
Well, what about the people that say, Gene, well, if none of us pay taxes, nothing will happen. No services will get done. The roads will all be in disrepair. The bridges will be falling down. We won't have any defense for the country. What happens if what do you say to people that come back? Because I hear that as well.
Guys, you sound like you're running for office as a Democrat.
Hey, listen, man, I'm just telling you what I hear on the chat. I'm just giving you what I hear in the chat.
Okay. Here's the deal. Highways are paid by fuel taxes. That's what they're funded by. Okay? State fuel taxes and federal fuel taxes. Income taxes do nothing but go for pay the interest on the national debt. They fund very little of the government. State-wise, most states have property taxes, and they use the property tax to fund most of the government. But in like Oregon, we have high income taxes here too. But the thing is that income tax is on income. It's not on your labor. It's an income tax. It's a profit tax. We either are going to have the rule of law or we're going to have the rule of the jungle. If there's rule of the jungle, I'm not going to pay for you sitting on your butt. If we're going to have the rule of law, then I want the law to be able to be brought into the courtroom. So if we don't stand up and learn how to defend ourselves and fight for what's right, we have a problem. Wouldn't you agree?
Indeed. Indeed.
So it's either we stand up and be counted or we lay down and be carpet. I think we have a way here of standing up and being counted. Because once you understand that you are testifying and what you're testifying to, you can only testify to truthfully. If you misrepresent something, you're attempting to defraud the government or defraud somebody else, or you're attempting to lie to get by. Well, I have to tell the truth. I can only swear under penalty of perjury to tell the truth. The truth is that my labor, my most sacred property, I have a right, a fundamental God-given right to sell that, to provide a home, to provide for my family, to provide for myself, to put a roof over my head, to buy my clothes and pay my expenses. That's a God-given right, and I'm sorry, it's not subject to an excise tax. If the government wants to tax our labor, it has to enact a direct tax, because that would be a direct tax on property or a tax on our right. But the income tax has been enforced under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 since its inception in 1862. Even before then, when the government wanted to collect taxes, they used Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. Duties, imposts, and excises to pay the expenses of the government. Doesn't contain anything about direct taxes. Look at the constitutional authority that Congress assigned to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that President Trump put through in the beginning of his administration. Congress cites Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. Do you get it? It's an excise tax, okay? An excise tax cannot be put on your labor. It can't be put on a right. It's a privilege tax. So what are you doing that is a privilege if you're earning a living? It's not a privilege. It's a fundamental God-given right. So this is why it's important to understand that this little paper you fill out, either state or federal, this is your testimony. If some revenue agent tells you you have to change your testimony, or they don't agree with it, and they're going to fine you and penalize you, that fine or penalty is an attempted extortion or an attempt to defraud you of your property. So if we're going to get a remedy here, we have to go after the agent and put a complaint in with the Attorney General that this agent, government agent, is attempting to coerce you to change your testimony. What do you think the Attorney General is going to do with that?
Well, you
want to see somebody get reamed. That's where you're going to get the remedy at.
Well, here's the issue I see, Gene. I see that if you do it and if I do it and maybe two more people do it, okay, well, they can certainly marginalize us and call us kooks and say, this goes against our standards, and we're going to throw your case out. But if hundreds and hundreds of people, if people all got together en masse and did this at once, they can't ignore us all. They can marginalize a handful of us that want to do this. But I mean, the power is in the numbers. Would you agree?
That's exactly right. The power is in numbers. I've got several people. We'd send a demand letter to the IRS and we demand that they produce the things that we're required to see. The Supreme Court says that every taxpayer, every individual is entitled to a plain statement of the basis in law and the factual situation that gives rise to a deficiency. So when the IRS comes at you and say, we determined that you owe this much, then you ask for that plain statement of the basis in law. I want to see the statute, the basis in law, statute and regulation, and the factual situation that gave rise to this liability. Have you ever seen the IRS tell you what statute makes you liable? It's impossible. There is no statute that makes you liable for the income tax. If you think there is, show me one. Section 1 of the code imposes a tax on taxable income, not on an individual. It imposes no tax on anyone. It imposes a tax on taxable income. Taxable income is derived from sources. See the 16th Amendment. So what's the source of your alleged taxable income? What privilege are you engaged in that produce the profit or gain that is subject to the income tax? Go read the Journals of Congress in 1913 when they were discussing the passage of the 16th Amendment to create the income tax. And look what Congress said about a man who was a financier, and he was engaged in financial transactions during the year. All the money that he made in the financial services business would be exempt from the tax because it was done by his own effort. So what we're doing by our own effort is exempt from tax. It's our property. It's our earnings. The only way you get taxed is if you volunteer. You fill out a form and send it in and say, yeah, I had $20,000 in wages. Oh, great. Pay your taxes. But were you actually paid wages for employment as defined in the code? No. That was your earnings. That was payment, compensation for your labor or personal services. That's not taxable income. Somebody like to debate that issue, I'll be happy to oblige them.
So you talked before about putting zero down. I'm assuming you're talking about a 1099. And we've talked before about if you...
No, I'm not talking about 1099. I'm talking about a tax return. You get a W-2 from your employer.
Right.
That's what they issue. They give you, they tell you to fill out a W-4. First of all, you need to understand that you can fill out a W-4 exempt.
Right.
But what you need to do first, the first thing that you need to do if you've been filing returns is to file some amended returns. Understanding, of course, what you're going to do in that amended return. If you don't do it correctly and don't make the right statement on the 4852 that you're going to file with in support of that amended return, the IRS will dump it back in your lap. But here again, you got to understand the remedy for that. And the remedy is you're interfering with my testimony. And that testimony is set out. This would fall under 18 U.S.C. 1512, I believe is the correct statute. So when you get to that one, 18 U.S.C. 1512, tampering with a witness, victim, or informant. Whoever knowingly uses intimidation, threats, or corruptly persuades another person or attempts to do so, or engage in misleading conduct towards another person with intent to influence, delay, or prevent the testimony of any person in an official proceeding. Is a tax return a testimony in an official proceeding? You better believe it. 2, causes or induces any person to withhold testimony or withhold a record, document, or other object from an official proceeding. Alter, destroy, mutilate, or conceal an object with the intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for the use in an official proceeding. What we have here is a bunch of people going around entering false testimony about you. They're lying about you, claiming they paid you wages for employment, which would be taxable under Social Security and unemployment compensation, instead of saying that they paid you compensation for personal services actually rendered.
Gene,
which we have a right to do.
We got a question that came in the chat room here. It says, do these statutes apply to living, breathing, flesh and blood men and women, or are they only to corporate fictions?
These statutes apply to anyone who files a tax return. This sounds like some of the gurus out there saying, "Oh, well, you got to get out of the republic. You got to get out of that. You want to go over. You want to revoke your citizenship and do all this garbage and jump this stuff, and all these statutes are made for artificial individuals and stuff." It don't fly in the courtroom. And if you want to go down to the courthouse and start looking at the cases where those kind of people make those kind of arguments and wind up in jail, be my guest. I'm not going to make those kind of arguments. I'm going to argue the code and the regulations and the Supreme Court cases that protect my right to earn a living. So when they tamper with that evidence, this is a federal offense. The 1040 is a federal document. The IRS is a federal agency. And it's an official proceeding. The statute, 18 U.S.C. 1512, is quite long. That's the federal statute, and every state contains codes that have the same information basically in it at the state level. So once you get it figured out here that you are testifying to something, what can you lawfully testify to? If your employer asks you to fill out a W-4 and you know that you don't owe a tax liability because this is part of your earnings, why don't you fill it out exempt? And here again, a W-4 is signed under penalty of perjury. Is that not your testimony? Excuse me. When you file an affidavit, that is testimony. It's signed and witnessed by a notary and signed under penalty of perjury. That's evidence in a courtroom. So is a W-4. It's evidence in court of your intent. And if you fill it out exempt because you're not required to pay taxes on your earnings, which is exactly what the law demands, take that into court. And the IRS tries to change that, says, oh, withhold at zero? Where did the IRS get the authority to cause you to have withholding in the first place if you're not engaged in employment? I mean, folks, we got to start thinking about the truth here and stop stumbling around in this jungle of BS that's out there.
Okay, let me ask you this. We got about just a few minutes left, Gene. What if somebody comes up here and the tax season's coming up here in a couple of months, or people are probably filing stuff now? What if they get a tax bill? What is their first step? I mean, I know they can go to your uncommonconsultant.org, but just
they get a tax bill, the first thing that they need to do is send a demand letter in response to that tax bill. You have to ask the right questions. If you don't ask the right questions, you start, talking about this or that statute or whatever, and you never get down to asking the question. Then they just run you around in circles.
And that's the kind of stuff that you provide at your website. You show the proper letters to write.
What we're doing, we're gonna have these documents are going to be made available on our website. So they're coming up here. We're working on getting all the information for them because each person is different. They have different addresses, different IRS addresses. Everybody's different. We got 50 states in this union, so everybody's different. But we're working on customizing that part of the documentation so we can get these up on the website. They'll be for sale at a reasonable price, reasonable fee for what they are, and you send them in. It's not a continuing operation. We make a demand. We put them on notice. The next demand notice for them is tampering with evidence and witness tampering, okay? Because they're tampering with your testimony that you already sent in. like a W-4. If they try to change that to 0, that's tampering with evidence. So you send them the demand letter, do the demand letter for tampering with evidence or tampering with a witness. They have 20 days to respond to that. I'm working on the next issue, and also the demand for evidence and witness tampering, that is sent to the state attorney general. You've got to get the attorney general involved in it, because he's the police officer for the government. So he's the one whose duty it is to prosecute people in the government that are violating the law. And believe you me, when they're making these demands on you and telling you what you can or cannot do about your labor, they are violating the law because they don't have that authority. So we send this demand document to the Attorney General. We give them 20 days to respond and provide their authority for changing your testimony. And at the end of that time, we're going to do a petition for judicial review of agency action. This is a federal statute, but I believe we'll find basically the same thing is available for state use also. But the federal statute on that is 5 U.S.C. 701 and 702. So you look at 5 U.S.C. 702, it's judicial review of agency action. It's petition for judicial review of agency action. And that's what they're going to ask for against the IRS. That petition will be available on the website. So we're working on drafting that up now. So we want to make things as interesting as possible for as many people as possible. I haven't paid a tax, an income tax, for over 20 years. And if the government would like to come after me for not paying taxes, my name is Eugene Dayton Pringle Jr. Be my guest.
Gene, I got a feeling that they're not going to do that because I think you got them probably figured out. Again, uncommonconsultant.org. Uncommonconsultant.org. Gene, we're just coming to the end of the broadcast here. We got another guest that's going to be coming on the show. What's anything you want to say here to folks before they go? The remedies are out there. You just have to research them and find them. And this is all stuff that's public, right? I mean, you people can find this information out there. I mean, it's all out there. You just have to take the time and energy to research it, right?
Yeah, everything is out there. People can start learning and learn the truth. But we have to stop chasing rainbows and get down to reality. Right. And the reality is we have rights, and the government's supposed to be protecting those rights. That's the first duty of government, was to protect the rights and property of the people. When a government becomes destructive to those ends, it's no longer our government, it's a tyranny.
Indeed.
We need to start standing up and fighting, but fighting on the right basis. Let's stick with the rule of law and our remedy under the law. Thank you, Jim, for having me on the show. Hope to come back and talk some more.
Gene, it's always great to have you here, brother. We so much appreciate it, and we're looking forward to having you back again on the broadcast. Gene Pringle, uncommonconsultant.org, uncommonconsultant.org. Thanks so much, Gene. Appreciate your time, brother.
You bet. Thanks.
Bye now. Okay, there goes Gene Pringle. We appreciate him being on the broadcast here. We are going to bring our next guest on here in a moment, Amy Proctor, who she was there in D.C. During what happened with the siege here a couple of days ago, which we're finding out. First reported, of course, it was Patriots, and I think there were some Patriots in the mix, but I think it was led sort of by Antifa. But we're going to bring her on the show here and have her talk about that. I think she's there in the waiting room and she's available. So let me see if I can bring her on here, and let's see if I pop this up here if that's the right. There we go. Amy, are you with us on the show? Hello, Amy. Can you hear us? Okay, I don't know if her audio is working. She was in the waiting room here for Zoom, and I just admitted her, and I don't see her audio here. Hopefully she'll get a message here. Maybe I can text her real quick and have her join. But Amy is down there in Washington, and she was there right with the siege, right what happened here a couple of days ago. And hold on here. Let's see. I have to tell her to connect her audio because she is there, but she doesn't have any audio set up. It doesn't seem like, so I'm going to have her connect the audio. Anyway, Amy was Brenda Roscoe's, who's been on the show here before. She brought Amy to us. She contacted Amy and got Amy on the show here for us, and we appreciate. There we go. Amy, are you there with us?
I am finally here with you.
Excellent, Amy. We so much appreciate you being here. We're just trying to kind of briefly explain what was going on here before you came on. Amy was, pardon me, and Amy, you can certainly tell the story, but you were there in Washington just here a couple of days ago in D.C. I think it was Wednesday, and of course we know everything that happened during that time. With all of the siege and now we're finding that it seems like Antifa was involved in that. They come out now and admit they were involved in that. And of course, terribly that the young lady, I think it was like Ashley Bobbitt or something, I think is her name. Or maybe that's not right exactly, but she got shot. You were there when that happened. I think there was some heart issues or some other medical issues of people that were there. Amy, we so much appreciate. You're a photojournalist. You're there in D.C. We so much appreciate you joining us. I'm going to just turn it over to you, and why don't you go ahead and just let us know, set the scene up for us. Again, you were there in D.C. You were there when this action happened. So just tell us what you saw, and I'm just going to go ahead and let you roll with it.
Okay, well, first of all, hello to your audience. And I was there the whole day. I live in Maryland, just north of D.C. I was there from 7 in the morning, and I was really excited about the day. I just wanted to kind of capture the mood, what was going on. So long story short, everything was going fine, as you know. And then at some point, I would say afternoon, we got up to the Capitol building. And, it's funny because now I'm going through my video footage and on my cell phone just in the last day or so. And I'm starting to find a lot of video of interesting things that corroborate Antifa being present and perhaps instigating some of the things that led to, what would be considered the violence inside of the Capitol building. So it's all very interesting. But essentially, I guess what I could add would be that I was just there, soaking it all up. This was a historic moment. I have lots of video that shows that, people, the Trump supporters who were there were not a mob. They were very, excited to be there, to be able to support the president. I'm starting to post video on my Facebook post account right now that shows, people chanting USA or We Love Trump, singing the national anthem. I mean, there was, we were not this angry, horrible mob. It was very upsetting to know that essentially we were seeing the death of a presidency, and that was all happening as we were approaching the Capitol building. So I think some of that adrenaline from just being disappointed over Mike Pence's decision not to, challenge the election results in some of these states, people were very upset about that. People started talking about going third party, and they're not going to tolerate this anymore. So there was some adrenaline going, but overall, people were just excited to be there. We were excited to, exercise our right to go to the Capitol building, which is very historic, and, show that we're not satisfied with this election being robbed. And I was just trying to be there as a participant because the president asked supporters to be there, and I felt like that was the least I could do. So there were a couple of incidences where, and so I was on the outside, kind of unaware of what was going on the inside, but I did. So this is some of what I'm going to say is secondhand, but I got a lot of firsthand accounts from people that were actually involved. And so at the beginning, when we had all gotten to the Capitol building, there were a couple loud explosions, and I'd flinch, and it was very loud, and it, from what I was told from a first-hand account, was that that was tear gas, which was by the Capitol Police, and the reason that happened, apparently it was unprovoked. So they may have seen people climbing the scaffolding, but nobody had gone into the Capitol at that point. But those loud explosions were so pronounced that a couple people suffered heart attacks. And they were carried through the crowd. A couple people, and I believe these were the ones who suffered the heart attacks. It was a gentleman. He was a little bit older than me, and a woman. You can see they were clearly in distress. Were carried out, and they apparently passed away at some point. You'll know that there were 4 fatalities.
Are you telling me, Amy? Hold on a second. You're telling me that the direct result of them sending off unprovoked canisters of either tear gas or some flashbang grenades or whatever, are you telling me that, like, literally after those went off, people suffered heart attacks? I mean,
Yes.
There's no doubt it was definitely as a result of that. There's no doubt in your
Well,
mind.
I mean, it is hypothetically possible that just the amount of people, it was getting really crowded. Even I was getting a little anxious because I at one point was like a sardine and couldn't move. So I can't say definitively, but directly following, I would say just within minutes, these people were being carried through the crowd out back towards Pennsylvania Avenue, where the ambulances could not get to them because there were so many people, and so these people died. And so what I was told by a gentleman, I just call him my patriot friend because I don't remember his name. He was there with the people that rushed into the Capitol the first time, and he said that was what caused the initial rush into the Capitol. Now, he would have to be able to confirm that, but it all lines up with everything that I observed and experienced while I was there on the ground, because immediately following those first 2 booms of the tear gas being, I guess it was on like the upper tier of the Capitol where that happened. That's when people started having medical issues.
So is it your contention, Amy, that there were the initial rush that went into the Capitol building there? We're finding out that was, I think, maybe initiated by Antifa, and they even it looks like there's some video of the guards letting the gates down, letting people in. There were patriots mixed in with that, right? There were a lot, I'm understanding there was a lot of patriots that were, and we're going to call it a siege. That was only a siege, but they want to call it, stormed it, rushed it. Did you find that there were patriots involved in that mix? As far as generally speaking, I know there was Antifa, but were there patriots mixed in there from what you could tell?
Going into the Capitol after that first initial rush?
Well, even the initial rush, or after, or the subsequent, the subsequent.
I think the problem with Antifa is that they just try to blend in, so it's hard to tell. It's like my husband was a soldier for 25 years, and when he was in Iraq, you couldn't tell the enemy from the civilian. It was a bit like that. Except that, some people did stand out because of the way they were dressed. They were in like really heavy gear that was just not consistent with being a Trump supporter showing up to a Trump rally. So some of those people were definitely there. And it was interesting because let me just backtrack a little bit. So at the beginning, when those 2 initial tear gas canisters were expelled, or whatever you want to call it, that's when I believe Trump supporters were so upset by seeing these people having heart attacks and dying, that's when they went up into the Capitol building. And that may very well have been what initiated the whole thing. And I don't know if that would be considered a misstep from the Capitol Police. They certainly were underprepared inside of the Capitol building for this amount of people, and they may have been a little cautious to see, a little scared to see all of these people who were climbing on the scaffoldings on the outside. Nobody was going in at that point. Everybody was just staying on the outside, sort of cheering different things and standing on the steps of the outside. But it could be that it could be, and this is, I can't verify it because I don't know what the police were thinking, but it is possible that they threw the tear gas at us in order to disperse us because they saw us kind of coming and they wanted us to disperse. I don't know that they thought we were going to enter, but in them doing so, it really upset the Trump supporters, as well as it gave an excuse for other nefarious groups that may have been involved, or infiltrated into the event. It gave them the initiative or the drive to go and confront, I would say, the police that were inside of the building, because they just saw, two Trump supporters dying in front of them.
Well, let me ask you this, if I can, Amy. We saw some videos of some fisticuffs or some rough stuff from the Capitol Police. We've also saw where they locked him in a hotel and put like bars across the doors so people couldn't leave their hotel room. From your observation, what was the general mood of the Capitol Police there? Do you think they acted appropriately? Do you think I think you said they were unprepared. Did they not act harsh enough, I guess to use a term, or did they act too harshly? If you had to analyze that, what would you say?
Well, I had no interaction with them, and I did not go inside the Capitol because I just, if I'd have known what was going on, I would have, just so that I could observe and take photos and kind of document it, because that's what I do. I try to document events. But I talked to a gentleman who was inside of the Capitol, and he said that when, for example, that woman was shot, and again, I don't, like you, I'm not totally sure of her name, that, it was, the idea was that they could have used rubber bullets or something like that
or tear gas or mace, for crying out loud. They could use mace. They didn't have to shoot her in cold blood like that. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Actually, I saw some video. I'm just now starting to get to the point where I can sort of look through people's videos and accounts, and it does look like she was taking a chance. There was a door that some people were breaking through to try to get to a different part of the Capitol, and there was a police officer behind, and they warned them to stand back. We're armed. And then you could see a gun kind of come out towards the window, and that was a police officer, and he was just shooting through the door. I don't know that it was intentional, but I will say that when you scuffle with police like that, you are taking a chance. But the Trump supporter that I spoke with said that, they should have used rubber bullets, it's interesting because I'm finding a lot of footage online, and as well as in my own videos, of Trump supporters discouraging vandalism, violence, harm, and things like that. I actually was on Instagram last night. There's Nat Geo. There was a National Geographic photojournalist there who was inside filming what was going on. And you can hear the Trump supporters after they get into the Capitol saying, like, this is our house. We're respectful to our house. Don't steal anything. Don't vandalize anything, don't hurt anything, this is just our house. And so that was what the Trump supporters were saying. So the other people who were causing the mayhem, I don't believe were Trump supporters, although I do think that surely there were some, because there were over 100 people at any given time roaming around within the Capitol. So I am very hesitant to blame police, just to give them the benefit of the doubt, because they do have a hard job. They have to take orders that they don't always believe in.
I understand. I agree with you. I'm just saying they could have used mace. They could have used mace, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
An unarmed person. She was unarmed. From what I
understood. I'm sorry, go ahead.
She was unarmed, from what I understand. It's not like she was waving a gun. She wasn't waving a gun to come inside. They could have maced her. Have you ever been hit with mace? I have. It's a stopper. It's not. You don't want to do anything. Yeah, basically. Right, you don't want to do too much charging forward if you're getting your eyes are burning like on fire from mace. Trust me, it's not fun.
Right.
So that could.
Well, I don't know if that particular police officer had any. I don't know. All I know is that I did see footage in the last 24 hours of scuffles going on between the police and these protesters, some of who were Trump supporters, and you have to understand that Trump supporters are really upset. We not only lost the presidency, we lost a lot. The Democrats now have they have a trifecta. They've the super majority, and so this was this was a clampdown. This was a message. I think everything that's going on now is a message to those of us who are Trump supporters, who are, who believe in our freedoms and all that. That we better knock it off and get over it. That's why they're, trying to talk about impeachment right now of the president. They're talking about, expulsion of different Republican senators who supported the president. I mean, this is all an attempt to try to make us submit and go away.
Yeah, it's communist takeover. It's communist takeover. Basically, it's a communist takeover.
I can't disagree with that. Well, yeah.
Question for you. And by the way, the name of that young lady that was shot was called Ashley Bobbitt. Okay. There was reports that 10 or 12 laptops were stolen from members of Congress. Did you happen to see any of that going on? Anybody grabbing stuff and taking laptops or anything else and walking out the door with that? Nothing. You didn't see any of that?
No. What I saw. I did not enter because I suffered a bit of cognizant dissonance during this whole thing. I mean, it was weird because I was getting phone calls and we were so packed in that they were going right to voicemail, so I wasn't answering my phone calls. I didn't even know I was getting them, and lots of texts. And then eventually, I would text back and say, "Oh, this is great. I'm having a great time." And nobody was understanding what I was saying because they were watching the news where apparently there was this horrible takeover inside. And I was acting like, "Oh, this is great. I'm having such a good time at this Trump rally." And the honest truth is that I was having a great time at that Trump rally. I didn't know that there were a bunch of people. I knew that there were people inside, but I didn't know how many people. So I have all this footage of while all this is going on, that poor woman that was shot, all the scuffles with the police and all the tear gas and everything. And I could hear the tear gas going off. I did hear the shot that killed the woman. But it was so different on the outside. Everybody was just enjoying things. People were singing the national anthem and God Bless America. It was so opposite of what I now understand, the seriousness of what was going on inside. So what I did see was, as I did climb the steps of the Capitol towards the entrances several times, and some Trump supporters came out and they're like, wow, there's, they were excited that they got to go into the Capitol. They felt like they were finally able to express themselves the way that our opponents always get to express themselves. When they have a problem, they go and overtake their state houses and they have sit downs and they, break things and burn things down. None of that was going on. Nobody was, burning anything. So, none of that was going on. But people were coming out, and as they did, they would tell me like, oh, there are people in there, and there were the people that I was speaking with weren't telling me about violence or anything like that. They were just excited that they got to go into the Capitol, and then they came back out and they were happy and, waving their flags and things like that. So I'm not sure where all this stuff was coming from, but there were big bursts coming out from the front of I guess that would be the rear of the Capitol building. So I didn't see people stealing anything. I don't know the extent of what actually happened in terms of any vandalism, but I will tell you this, that when we initially approached the Capitol building, there's a monument right at the parking lot, right before you get to the Capitol itself. And and I just posted this on Facebook actually, and there were people up there with megaphones, and they were kind of trying to get people riled up. And then at the end of my video, you can hear a Trump supporter saying, we're supposed to be better than our opponents. We're supposed to be better than them. We, stating that, you don't go up there and sit on a monument. We should respect our history and our monuments and stuff like that. And that was a theme that was recurring throughout this entire day that I noticed when we were at the Capitol, is that Trump supporters were telling certain people, don't do that. Don't break that glass. Don't deface a monument, or which actually didn't happen, but don't sit on a monument. It's a statue to somebody that we're supposed to be respectful of. So there was this. I just started noticing things like, wow, that's odd behavior for a Trump supporter to break a window to get in. Well, it turns out those weren't Trump supporters. I firmly believe that those were Antifa that were leading the charge, through breaking windows and things like that, and probably, so if laptops were stolen and things like that, I would say that those were probably not Trump supporters.
So is it your contention, Amy, that from your observations, and we're on there in the ground in D.C. at the Capitol, is this a true statement? Would you stand behind the statement that not only did you not really see any Trump supporters perpetrating any violence, but on the contrary, you saw Trump supporters actually trying to stop others who weren't likely Trump supporters from committing violence? So they were very respectful and almost acted like they took care of their own, almost acted like their own little police force within themselves there to police other people from breaking things. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yes, that is accurate. In fact, I talked to a gentleman, so this would be a secondhand account for me, but a firsthand account coming from him. I saw these people taking a big slab of plexiglass and bringing it. It was just kind of odd. It was kind of like when you're at a concert and people like throw themselves onto a crowd and they kind of move the person through the crowd. It was kind of like that. They did that with a ladder and with plexiglass, and several of us said, what are they doing? Why is that ladder like moving up towards the Capitol building? Well, it turns so somebody, the gentleman I was talking to, was up by the window and there's video footage of somebody breaking through the glass of the Capitol building, and he said, we don't do stuff like that. That's what Antifa does. And the guy that was breaking the window said, we are Antifa. And then at that point, I think somebody tackled him, and there's actually video footage of that as well that I put on Facebook. So the ones, in my opinion, who were causing most of the mayhem, definitely the violence, breaking things, were Antifa.
Amy, we appreciate you coming on the show here today. Let people know where they can find out more about you and your Facebook pages, and where I know you said you posted some of this stuff on your Facebook. Where can people go to find it? And if those people are not on Facebook, do you have any other outlet, a website, or anything like that where you're going to be posting?
I do. I'm as a photojournalist, I try to keep politics and my profession separate, but it's a little harder to do that. I'm on Instagram at I Love New Zealand. It's ILUV and then New Zealand spelled out. And I'm going to be posting on my story in a little while today. I'm going to be posting some of the video footage of what the Trump supporters were actually doing on the ground. And it's contradictory to this whole mob mentality. So there's I Love New Zealand on Instagram, and then on Facebook, I've made public a lot of my videos and experiences from there, as well as a account of everything that I experience, and that would be facebook.com/Amy's AMYS bottom line up front. And so you can go there.
Amy's bottom line up front on Facebook. Amy's bottom line up front. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's where the videos will be, and any images and stuff that you've taken, any photos and videos. Well, maybe not all of them are there yet, but eventually that's where they'll probably go. That's
probably the best place to find them for now. Yep.
Great. Amy, we so much appreciate you taking time. Glad you made it back safe. You
me too.
You really were, and you were really right in the middle there of an historic event that's going to go down for generations to come. They're going to be talking about what happened there that day, I'm sure.
Well, I would like to say just one last thing.
Sure.
The reason I left, it must have been about 4:15. I was going up the steps of the Capitol, like a balcony to look down over this incredible group of people. There were so many people, and then this tear gas came out to disperse us. Like, it was right beside me, and so I was so overwhelmed by the inability to breathe. I couldn't see. It was awful, and it kind of had to stagger down the steps with a bunch of other people. And it was at that point I decided, okay, this could potentially be dangerous, and it's going to be getting dark soon, so I'm going home. And there were people, it was really sad to see, but this is one of the, this is what happens, I guess, when you're dealing with tear gas. There were people that were kind of doubled over, unable to walk, vomiting, stuff like that. And I tried to help some of those people as much as I could while trying to help myself. So at the end there, it got pretty crazy, but that was what precipitated me leaving. It's interesting that what started the whole thing in the beginning was the tear gas. And then what kind of ended it for me at the end was the tear gas too. So it was quite a day.
Did you ever think that possibly those people that were crying and vomiting were because they ran into Nancy Pelosi perhaps inside?
I didn't think of it that way. But
of course.
it's possible.
That's what I would do.
It is possible.
Amy, we so much appreciate you being here on the broadcast. Thanks so much. And if anything else develops in that line, please certainly give us a call. Reach out to me and be happy to discuss it with you.
All right. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Amy. I appreciate you being here today.
Okay. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay, there goes Amy Proctor. I appreciate her being here on the broadcast. She was there on the scene, and she tells a different tale. I think that a different tale than we hear on the mainstream media, where Trump supporters were peaceful, and although there were some patriots, obviously, as she stated, she met him walking out of the place. From her observations and her comments on this show, she stands behind the fact that the Trump supporters were not the violent ones. It was the Antifa and others. Who knows how many different groups are going to be there. Antifa, I guess, is just a general term. There's probably some splinter radical type groups that showed up. They always do. But generally, they're funded by the same source. So, you make your own decision on that. But we do appreciate Amy coming here on the broadcast. We are glad that she made it back safe. And she really was living into historic times there. And this is going to be talked about for generations to come. Ashley Bobbitt is that young lady's name. We are, I know there's reports going around that some of that was a false flag and that she's still alive. I don't really looked into that. I asked Amy about that in the pre-show, and she said, well, she's in the morgue. So I guess, you'd have to determine that she's dead if she's in the morgue. I haven't checked to see if she's in the morgue. I haven't had time to. Like I said, I didn't follow down and go down that rabbit hole. I know there's videos out there right now saying that she didn't die and it was a false flag. Haven't had a chance to review them, can't comment on them. I asked Amy about it, as I said, in the prelim, and she said that the gal's in the morgue, so make your own determination. Someone can fact check that. I just haven't had time. I just talked to her right before the show. At any rate, we appreciate you looking in here on the show, on the broadcast. MontanaGazetteRadio.com. That's MontanaGazetteRadio.com or MontanaDailyGazette.com. And we appreciate your support. If you just go to, we put out a lot of good articles up at Montana Daily Gazette. Please visit the site and share them around. If you want to support this broadcast directly, you can go to northwestlibertynews.com. Click on the Support Independent News button there. And we function based upon the support of our listeners, you folks out there. So thanks so much for being here. We appreciate both of our guests today, Gene Pringle and Amy Proctor. We're so glad for them to be on the broadcast with us. Thanks so much for joining us here today on the show. We'll be back next time. And until then, this is James White for Montana Gazette Radio, saying bye now.